Because there are a lot of people who here get on ACX and just go. But you mentioned you'll find some bad clients, or you could find some bad clients. Like, what do you mean it specifically? What makes them bad?
ACX, they have varying rates for projects. A person who puts up their audiobook, they're looking for an audiobook narrator, they can select their rate. And if I recall, I think they got rid of the lowest one, which was 0 to 50 per finished hour. Now, per finished hour, that is not the same as per hour or per studio hour. So when it comes to audiobooks, per finished hour is kind of the usual standard rate of payment. That is per finished hour of audio. So it can take you, like you said, when you did your first book, it took you 18 hours for that two-hour book. If you were on a per finished hour contract, you're getting paid for the 2 finished hours. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into making that same per finished hour. And ACX, because, well, let's be frank, it's Amazon. They're the biggest game in town, so they could just do whatever they want. They allow lower rates, which unfortunately, a lot when you're new and you say, well, I'm not an experienced narrator, I'm not, I don't have this big resume to my name, you go for the lower rated work. Because, you tell yourself, well, I need to work my way up. I'm new, I don't know nothing. And once I start building up my resume, then I'll go for the higher rates. You set yourself up for a lot of, one, very crappy titles. If you see through ACX or if you look on Audible, you see those little 30-minute summary books or cookbooks, these like super abbreviated biographies, just trash titles, essentially. What may work for a Kindle book may not necessarily work for an audiobook, especially for ACX and Audible. They determine the pricing, you don't. So they determine the pricing generally by length. So if it's like less than 3 hours, I think the audiobook is like $5. If it's more than 3 hours, I think it goes up to like maybe $7 to $10. If it's beyond like 7 hours, it goes into a different price bracket. So you will see with those cheaper, those fluff titles, they either pad out the wording or they may ask you, because this happened to me because I was a know-nothing narrator, justify, like, oh, I take the lower rates. I remember one client, it was a crappy title, like one of those, like how to pick up women type books. Yeah.
No, he didn't. No.
Like, I got to build up the resume, you got to do something. And the book was very short, so it was less than 3 hours. But because of that pricing thing, the client wanted me to alter the audio, like slow it down, add more pauses to get it past 3 hours.
Oh, shit.
He wanted me to basically add in some extra material just to fluff it up, to get it past that certain limit. And me, even as a know-nothing guy, it's like, that seems kind of questionable, which it is. One, an Audible listener is not going to want that. But also that's against ACX's terms of service.
Right, okay.
You can't be doing that type of stuff. And this was a 0 to 50, I think it was a 30 per finished hour title.
That's horrendous.
Horrendous rate. But those are the clients that expect the world out of you. They're going to ask you to do things that are questionable. I remember at one point when I was giving them a little bit of pushback on like the editing things, it was kind of holding the project over me, like, oh, I know you need this job and all that type of stuff.
Wow.
That's how you get those kind of clients at the bottom tier.
I see. It's across the industry then, man. It's everywhere. Every genre seems to have that problem. Tell us some differences that you've learned between fiction and nonfiction. And in fiction, is there something that they need to know, like fantasy, or are there special ways to approach these different subgenres as well?
So when it comes to fiction, as you said, fiction is very broad. So whether it's historical fiction or whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, stuff like that, certain things in genres allow you to do a little more.
Okay.
For example, accent work. There's going to be a time where you're going to have to at least have some familiarity with vague accents at the very least. The more trained you are with accents, you can expect to get more work. Because there may be a character in a story that's Russian, or there's a character that comes in and they're, German or whatever. Well, they can't sound standard American. You do that, people are going to be like, what in the world what is this?
Okay.
You have to at least try.
Mm.
And a lot of actors, we're not perfect with accents. The better you are at accents, like I said, you could expect to get more work. Have the essence of the accent.
Okay.
Make sure that one character sounds separate from another character.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the story, because again, for an Audible or an audiobook listener, you cannot expect the listener to have the book in front of them.
Okay.
They need to be able to follow the story purely off of your voice. So when one character is talking, that character needs to sound separate from the narrator voice or the other characters in a story. And when you get to certain genres, you get to have a little bit more creativity. So like with sci-fi, that's one of my more preferred genres. Or even in fantasy, you have non-human creatures. You got aliens, you have mythical monsters and stuff like that. You can be a little more creative with your voicing. You could do that growly, that Gollum type voice, or sound like you're an insectoid or whatever. And people want that in those genres. You can't do that with, historical fiction. They're all humans of various countries and accents. You can't be sounding crazy like that.
The insectoid voice, yeah.
Yeah, unless it's like cowboys and aliens or something like that. Then you might be able to have a little fun with it.
Is that historical?
Well, yeah, I guess not. I guess more sci-fi with historical fiction in there. Certain genres will allow you to do certain things. You also have to understand what the audience is going to expect in those genres. Because audiobooks, they're not new now. Audiobooks compared to the book industry is expanding. It is one of the few industries where every year the audiobook market is expanding. Before when you thought audiobooks, you thought Audible. And to be fair, they are still pretty much the place for audiobooks. But now Spotify's getting both into audiobook distribution and audiobook productions.
Yeah, oh, wow.
Libraries have audiobooks. There's a bunch of smaller audiobook markets.
So when you're doing your marketing on LinkedIn, is that to kind of get people interested in buying the book, or is that just more so for buyers of voices to hear you?
Different platforms have different audiences. And so you may put out the same video for different reasons. For LinkedIn is not where audiobook listeners are for the most part. It's, audiobook producers, fellow narrators, that it's the business platform. So when I put content out for social media on LinkedIn, it's more for the audiobook producers. It's more for perhaps other narrators. Maybe they, some audiobook projects may have dual narrators or multicast. That's becoming increasingly a thing now. And when they can, for audiobooks, they want to know how you sound. They don't want to have to go looking for your work.
So there is the motive is there. Okay. All right. Yeah, because I think that's important to note for people is like, you mentioned the different platforms have different audiences, and a piece of content on TikTok versus LinkedIn, the same piece of content could net a different result.
When it comes to audiobooks, Instagram and TikTok are the biggest platforms for authors and for listeners or readers. Like if you look up the hashtags like Bookstagram or with Book Talk, you have Narrator Talk, the authors and listeners are actively engaging in these genres on these platforms. Facebook has its groups. One of the benefits of Facebook is you have a specific page or specific group where you can go to. But Facebook tends to be more older skewing audience.
Yeah.
If it's good, if you're an audiobook narrator through ACX, this is a little side tangent, but sometimes you may get a promo code. So you can give those out to listeners or maybe give those out to fans. Facebook, if I need to get some quick reviewers outside of audiobook reviewers that I know from like blogs and other websites, ACX review groups.
Wow.
You put your book out, say, hey, I got US codes or UK codes. People say, hey, I'd like a code. You give it to them. It doesn't really work so well on Instagram or TikTok.
How should a new voice actor approach a nonfiction book if they're trying to just get their first book under their belt?
Don't assume that because it's nonfiction, you don't have to act. As a narrator, your job is to tell a story. And if you're just, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, that's boring. An audiobook listener is not going to want that. You know, if you're doing a book on Kevin Durant, you know, it may be a dry book. It may just say, on September, this happened. On October, this happened. There's still a story being told, or something is being told, even for let's say a business book. Business may not necessarily be telling you a story. It's telling you how to be a better leader or how to do X, Y, Z in your business. Your approach to that type of text is what's going to separate you from, another narrator. So if, like the way it's been explained to me, if we ever talk about coaches, one I can recommend wholeheartedly is Sean Pratt. He's big in the industry. Think of it like a TED Talk. If you ever see the TED Talk videos, they are talking to an audience. They are talking about a certain subject, be it, saving the trees or whatever. It may be dry content, quote unquote, but the way they talk to the audience is what keeps it engaging. So even if it's a nonfiction title, since there's, just like fiction, there's a lot of different genres within nonfiction, talk to the audience. If it's about how to be a better leader, put yourself in the role of a teacher. You're the business coach. You are helping somebody, because if they have that audiobook or if they were buying the book, they want to be a better leader. So you are teaching them how to be a better leader. And when you put yourself in that role, you have to act. If you just say being a better leader involves treating people nice and listening to people and be observant, well, that sounds boring.
Yeah.
But if you put yourself in that role of the leader who is trying to teach someone how to be a better leader, naturally, what you're going to emphasize is going to be different. The same way if you were trying to teach someone like right in front of you, you are going to highlight the important bits. Your pacing is going to change. When you want something like, say, a complex topic or a point that you're trying to drive home, you may slow that pace down. You're going to make sure this point stands out. Certain books are going to have certain things that you might have to add. Like I said, there's so much to audiobooks. This is something that you might have to deal with, especially if you're working with publishers. You may get a book in nonfiction that has graphs or it has charts. Business. Well, in business, generally you're going to have to deal with graphs or charts because they may have an illustration that explains the benefits of in-office work compared to working at home. The person who has the book can see it, and the graph says, this is the benefits between X, Y, and Z. An audiobook listener, depending, you may either have to create something new that says, please refer to this picture in this available workbook, or you might have to basically write out an explanation of how that graph explains the point. Get that approved by the rights holder, of course. And then you have to basically explain the graph and make that seem like that was part of the original text.
Wait, so you're saying explain it in your own words, or they have text that's provided for you?
You may have to create your own words to explain.
Interesting. Okay.
And if that's the case, of course, if you're ever going to change a script, you need to make sure you got approval for it.
Of course.
In any industry, you can't just change stuff willy-nilly. Depending on the work, you may have to think outside the box, quote unquote. They may have exercises where they want you to write out your feelings on how you would handle this situation. And it's something that the person who has the physical book or the ebook would have space to write out whatever. If you're an audiobook person, you may have to come up with, again, with rights holder approval. For this section, please grab a piece of paper and a pen. Please pause the audio as you write down and consider your answers.
Interesting.
And then when you would go over the points, like 1, write down your feelings on how you would handle somebody who's late to work. And then you would give time for a person to, I need to pause this audio. They do the exercises. And then you continue on to the next point.
That's the little nuggets, man. Those are those little nuggets that really... You don't know about, I'm guessing you figured that out yourself, like along the way.
You learn the hard way.
Yeah,
You learn.
Man.
There's learn as you go, but
Yeah.
when you get training, especially from an audiobook coach,
Mm-hmm.
they prepare you for these things ahead of time.
I see.
So when you do get those books, or now because you have the training, you can actively pursue those books because now you know how to handle them.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be able to do the job right and do it in a way that benefits the listener as well.
What does a month look like to you? A good month? Like, how many books do you have on your plate at one time? How are you managing your time? Like, what does that look like?
So, as is the case with all freelancers, you know, your work is not always guaranteed, so you got to look for work. And because I'm a part-time narrator, I have a day job. Out in the real world, I gotta work. For me, I generally work nights doing audio. And during the day, I may look for books that I may want to audition for. In the world of audiobooks, there's the indie scene, and then there's publishers. If you are a new narrator, don't worry about publishers because they're not always going to be looking at you. They want people with experience under their belt. If you're a new narrator, your options are either what you find on ACX, which is not always the cream of the crop, or as you eventually learn how to do, you got to learn how to cold call. You got to learn how to find your mules,
Mm-hmm.
and that involves looking up, the genres that you want to work in. Look up books that don't have an audiobook. Look to see if that book is something that, depending on the contract, you may want a royalty share contract or a pure per finished hour contract. See if that's something that author may want to do. You may have to learn how to research. Who is this author? Where can I find this author? Not every author has a website. Not every author's website works the way it should. Like contact forms, don't expect that contact form to work. But they may have social media.
Mm-hmm.
Same way in this day and age, especially with, the rise of AI, social media is becoming an increasing necessity for authors and for narrators. So you may look them up on social media. Do they have an audiobook put out? Are they actively marketing their book? If so, hey, hit them up. You send them a sample. Have you thought about making an audiobook? Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. Now you're in the negotiating phase. I would say for a new narrator, it might be easier to start out with ACX. But you are going to learn.
All that legwork. Just get straight to the point, basically.
It removes the legwork, but you're at the mercy of what's on ACX.
Right.
What's available for auditions is generally either lower paying work, a lot of romance titles. Hey, if you like romance titles, hey, it's open playground. But if you want, for example, sci-fi books, well, sci-fi books are either in the hands of publishers or they don't have the book on ACX yet. So you got to go and find them.
I see.
Like, you will learn, whether you're new or you're experienced, if you want good work, you got to find that work. People always have a tendency to kind of simplify these jobs. If you're doing an audiobook, whether it's ACX or, your own, you are a producer. The client is going to expect a fully produced audiobook. So that involves more than just reading. When you got to audition to get the book, you have to record the book. You have to edit the book. You have to master, audiobook or audio mastering for files. You got to learn how to do that. Unless you got money to pay somebody to do that, you're going to have to learn how to do that. And there's also proofing the audiobook. Do not expect your client to do your audiobook proofing for you.
What is proofing?
And when I say proofing, that's basically listening to it. So a person would listen for errors.
Okay.
You make more errors than you think you're going to make. I've been doing this for years. Any professional, we're going to make mistakes. And especially, this is one of those parts of the industry where, unless you're working with a publisher, and again, if you're new, you're not going to have a publisher. The client is not your proofer. You got to learn. You got to have the funds to outsource proofing, because for proofing, it's not just checking to say the word was can't, and you said another word. Sometimes that happens. It could be maybe there was some audio errors, like the audio sounded distorted, or there were plosives, like that "p" sound in the microphone. and it's very distracting and needs to be redone. But also mispronunciations. There's like Houston, Texas. There's Huston Valley. They're spelled exactly the same. Now, me being Texan, I might say Houston Valley because I know of Houston, Texas. But no, it's pronounced differently.
You might miss that in the proofing too because you just don't know.
Yeah, if you don't know how the word is pronounced, you're not going to catch that because in your ears it sounds correct.
Mm-hmm.
But a professional proofer is going to check for this stuff.
I see. Are these people expensive?
So generally a proofer, again, rates vary in this industry, but on average you can expect to pay $25 to $30 per finished hour. If you're working on a 7-hour book, well, you got to pay that person, however the finished product's length is.
So if you're going for like $200 per finished hour, you got to, wow, okay, I see. Damn.
So this is what separates the hobby. This is how you learn the hard way. This is, anybody says, it's easy, just jump in. This is a business. Even if you don't want to approach this as a business, this is a business. So there are costs to doing business. So unless you're with a publisher, because again, a publisher would have their own team of editors and masters and proofers, and they just ask you to give them raw audio. And they handle all their stuff and they send you the corrections. If you're working through ACX or you're freelancing or whatever, you're expected to provide the client a fully produced audiobook. If there's anything you have to outsource, it will be at a minimum the proofing, because a listener doesn't want to hear a book full of errors and mispronunciations, because they will tear you to shreds in the reviews if you don't do that. Editing and mastering, you can do that yourself. I do that myself. You could outsource that if you want, but again, that takes more money out of your pocket. So unless you're charging, a good rate, that may eat into your profits.
What are some of the technical things? Let's talk about DAWs and editing just for a second. Because one of the biggest, I think I may have told you, like my very first audiobook, I didn't know how to handle breaths. And so I copied and pasted my breath through the entire audio. Bro. But like, what are some things people need to know about editing? Like punching and rolling, I know is something to mention, but breaths, what is editing? Let's talk about that.
So I guess the first thing when you're talking about a DAW, was it like digital audio workstation or something like that? Basically, that's just what you're recording with. Some people record in Audacity. My first few audiobooks I recorded in Audacity. I'm a Studio One person myself. Some people record with Reaper. Some people record with Adobe Audition. At the end of the day, if you can deliver a good product, no one is honestly going to care what you're recording on. Okay. Because this is more of an equipment thing. Your space and your recording equipment is going to matter more than what recording program you use. The recording program is just about, well, I guess ease of access. Ease of access, how to record. And if you say, okay, well, how do I master this? How do I produce that within this program? There's plenty of groups, there's plenty of forums for every platform, so you can know how to, work within whatever DAW you're using. A lot of things are going to get taken out by mastering, and you could get into the super nitty gritty about the equalizers and and all that other stuff. You're going to look that stuff up in groups, because again, every platform is going to have different levels and things like that. But when it comes to breaths, it's okay to breathe. It's okay. Now if you're and all that type of stuff in your audio, so long as the breaths are not distracting, it's all right. Because pure silence sounds very unnatural. Pure silence is like distracting to a listener. We live in sound. Even in this quiet, treated space, there is still sound. There's still a room tone, as you were talking earlier. Breaths are okay in audiobook narration. And in some cases where your acting matters, you may need to breathe heavier. The character's, he's breathing heavy, he's gasping for breath, this is like a heavy scene or whatever. Well, your breathing is going to change according to that scene or those acting choices. It's okay to have that. It doesn't have to be, I have to edit out every breath or whatever. Now, if you listen and you can hear and all that type of stuff, those are more physical techniques or your mic placement that can affect that. If the microphone is too close, generally about forehead to hand length away, roughly, that's a good distance for a microphone. It doesn't need to be right on you, like a singer, like they may have it real close.
That's a Neumann, right?
Yeah, this is a Neumann TLM 103.
No.
If you're a new narrator, you don't need to buy this. This one,
Do you? I mean, is this a problem if somebody wants to go with a shotgun mic?
So microphones, you just have to know about how the microphone picks up sound.
Mm-hmm.
Some are like cardioid microphones, like I think this one. So no, this is a condenser mic. So it's a more wide receiving range on what it picks up.
Mm-hmm.
Shotgun mics are very directional. That's why they work out in like the fields, like the film industry, because they want to pick up what they want to pick up. They don't want to pick up the environment around them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is more of the physicality side of performing. You got to work with what your microphone is. If the microphone is only going to pick up what's directly in front of it, you can't be shifting here and there. I record one day here, I record one day here, I record one day here.
Sounds different, yeah.
The audio is going to sound different because the microphone's only going to pick up sounds within a certain area. So a shotgun mic is perfectly fine for. There are plenty of narrators who, they put out like, audible releases with a shotgun mic or whatever. But you just have to know how to work within your equipment.
And I heard you kind of shifting them around just a moment ago where your chair made a sound. Is all of that going to be taken out in editing as well?
You generally don't want to bring in stuff that makes a lot of noise because that's gonna make a lot of extra work for you on the back end. Because I sit, some people, they narrate standing up, they have like a standing desk or whatever. I generally am conscious of keeping my chair still. And if I move around or if I shift or whatever, I may check back in the audio. Can I hear that? If I can, either I might just simply re-record the thing with that punch and roll editing, or punch and roll recording, not editing. Or if it's quiet enough in my post-production where I'm, doing noise removal and stuff like that, I could just simply take it out there.
I see. So it's okay to actually edit your audio with like filters and equalizers and stuff like that, compressors. I mean,
so the one thing I would say don't do is don't use a noise gate.
Oh, with the silence.
That is, that silence thing. That is not good for audiobooks. That might be good for other avenues of voiceover, but as anyone who jumps in the industry learned, different avenues of voiceover have different ways of doing things. Noise gates are not good. It's okay to have room tone. Now, unless you hear an air conditioner in the background, you may have to check and see what your post-production, like your mastering, whatever noise removal program you may have, see if that can remove some of that. Equalizing your compressions, your gain and stuff like that, that's part of the mastering. So that is going to be part of your production. Some people have mastering chains where, like for me, again, in this industry, it's a relationship industry, so you learn to know where to go when you want stuff done. There's a person, I'll throw his name out, Don Barnes. He is like the master
Donnie
of
Barnes,
you gotta look at, was it Isotope RX?
Dude, I live and breathe by Isotope, bro.
So like you can handle a lot of your noise removal and all that type of stuff in there. I just record my raw audio, make sure the gain puts it in a certain range for ACX. I pop it in the mastering chain, hit process, and there you go. And you can set up that type of stuff for audio. For audiobooks.
When we talk about the future of stuff here, a lot of people are talking about AI. And my assumption was that with AI, audiobooks would be kind of in trouble. Like, do you have some insights on how AI is impacting your industry and what it looks like in the future?
It is a yes and no portion of how it affects the industry. So again, this is a case of Amazon just doing whatever they want because they're the biggest game in town. Audible is now producing AI audiobooks,
From which
which
voices?
is for like those virtual voices, whoever they have signed up, or maybe they didn't sign people up.
Oh
You know,
shit!
this is the wild west of ethics right now with AI, where sometimes being on certain platforms on the back end terms of service, you because you clicked agree to terms of service and didn't read the contract, they may have the right to use your audio for AI
Like training the AI
or
model and stuff.
your art or whatever assets you may have.
Wow.
Squarespace, if you have a website, they had that thing and they just slip it in there. We updated our terms of service, and you're like, yeah, okay, whatever, I agree. But you don't
Jeez.
know on the back end they put it. There was a setting that gets automatically enabled when you agree that they have the right to use your website or your assets for AI training.
Damn.
And this is the nitty gritty of like business ethics
No,
and all
man.
that type of stuff.
They need to know these things,
But
man.
yeah, so read terms of service. Be aware. It helps if you're involved with narrator community because, like I said, nobody's paying that much attention to this kind of stuff, and things change so rapidly.
Yeah.
You may not always know until other people start talking about it. Facebook groups, the Indie ACX group, other audiobook related groups. They'll talk about audiobook related things. So ACX and other things regarding audiobooks, you'll find out about news there. For AI, it is an attractive option to indie authors and the low-paying clients because realistically, indie authors, just like a lot of narrators, they have day jobs. They don't have money. Audiobook productions cost money. And especially if you are conducting yourself like a business, you got to make money
Yeah, man.
to operate profitably. And so ACX, even now, they're offering audio, like virtual voice audiobooks to authors for free. And that's a tough thing to compete with. It's tough to compete against free, but that's part of the business side where you got to know how to market yourself. AI, yeah, it's alarming, it's growing, it's expanding, and the AI is improving. I will say the AI, the virtual voicing now versus when it came out, it is better. And if you are a new narrator, you can't just jump in and expect to learn as you go necessarily, because the AI is basically at newbie levels of audiobook narration.
That's thank you for pointing that out. That's an interesting thing that people need to know about. Like, you got to get your training. That highlights how important it is to coach.
You got to get training. Yeah, don't jump in like, I shouldn't have done it, but I jumped in before AI.
Yeah, I want to say we have the benefit of getting a little bit of a head start.
We live in an AI world now. AI is never going to go away. And if you are jumping into this industry, same as any other industry, to be honest, you're going to be expected to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
On the acting front, again, you don't need to go to an acting school or whatever, but you need to have some training. You need to be trained on how to act for fiction or for nonfiction. You need to know how to produce your audio into an audiobook for at least the ACX specs. Like, that's not the client's job, that's your job. These are things you need to know how to do. And then if you want to grow and succeed, you also need to learn how to market yourself. You got to know your worth as a business. Same for, a guy like me. I'm not 1,000 audiobooks like Sean Pratt or whatever. I'm very selective with what I get. So I'm still like 50-something audiobooks. But I've been around long enough, and I know my worth, that I can negotiate with clients. I know how to avoid the low-paying ones. I had a client that I was doing with the cold calling, and of course, they expect lower rates. Per finished hour is not something that people are used to. They are used to per hour. And again, on the indie scene, people don't have as much money as a, Harper Collins or Penguin Random House. So naturally, they want things done a little cheaper, or they want something within their affordable range. This man's rate was very low. Again, for a newbie, you're going to learn the hard way. There's more involved than just talking into a microphone. For every per finished hour, and this number may increase if you don't have the experience, you can expect perhaps for 1 hour of finished audio, maybe 2 to 3 hours of recording, especially because you're new, because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to do retakes and things like that. About the same amount of time for editing, and then we could put another hour in for mastering, making sure your stuff fits within the audiobook specs.
Does that include, do you like preview the book first, like read it one time through before you start reading, or you just jump straight in and start reading?
Yes, you got to read the book. You got to read the book, especially in fiction. Nonfiction, you still have to read, and you still have to do some measure of prep. In nonfiction, you may have to look up pronunciations for words. If they're talking about towns and locations and names, you're going to have to learn how this stuff is pronounced, especially locally. Again, Houston, Texas, and Huston Valley, the Houston portion is spelled exactly the same, but it has 2 different pronunciations. Or Gloucester, the city of Gloucester. It is not spelled the way it sounds.
I don't even,
can't
even guess.
It's like, well, who came up with this? You're going to have to look this stuff up. That's part of your prep for a book.
Wow, so this can easily balloon into many hours per finished hour.
It takes time. I'm about to get a book, historical fiction, and involves some German and, some other language stuff. So I'm going to have to look up how to pronounce this stuff. I'm not fluent in German, so I got to look up how to say these things authentically. With fiction, it's a story. So it might be a little more entertaining to read the story, but you're also going to be having in the back of your mind make your acting choices. Does the book describe the character's age, their mannerisms? A well-written book is going to give you this stuff, but you got to read it. The client may not tell you this up front. So you may have to get an idea of how a character behaves. That's going to inform your acting choices. The character's age, that's going to inform your acting choices. Does the character have an accent? If the character is stated to have an accent, you can't ignore that accent. I like going to the store, he said in his Russian accent. like what? So that's going to involve your acting choices. And these details are not always revealed as soon as the character's introduced. For a storyteller, it helps if you know where the story is going. If you're reading a mystery and you don't know what the actual clues are, how can you convey that to the listener? You should not be doing a cold read on an audiobook. That will affect your performance, and that can also affect the reviews you get.
How do the reviews impact the narrator?
Reviews impact narrators in the sense that, especially if you're in a book that gets royalties, if it's per finished hour, who cares about the reviews? That's not my problem at that point. But unless they start saying bad things about your performance, then you need to take a look at what they're saying. But especially if you're in a contract, like a royalty share contract with an author, people buy products that are well reviewed.
Right.
It's hard to sell a product that has no reviews. Authors have this issue. When you become a narrator, you may have this issue, especially for a royalty share product, because that's where you're going to make your money. You need to get reviewers. Don't buy reviews. That's unethical. That could get your book taken down. That's part of where you learn who audiobook reviewers are, or audiobook listener groups. So you can give it to them, because they're people who like audiobooks. And so they'll be more generous in giving you a rating or a review. But you can turn those reviews into marketing. If anybody ever eventually looks at my website, there's audiobook reviews. Or if you've seen with the videos that I was putting on LinkedIn and Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff. At first, I was just putting out the videos of just basic plot synopsis. Get the book. I started changing it to where I would open with a review quote. And if anybody went to my audiobook, they would find that quote in one of the reviews where I say, Shamaan is incredible. Shamaan does an excellent job. The story's incredible. You can use that to your advantage. Nobody likes unproven talent. If people praise your narration, use that to your advantage in marketing, and you can even use part of that to your, if you ever get into, once you reach the cold calling stage, the stranger showing up in somebody's inbox out of the blue, at least if that person has some accolades to their name, well, maybe they might be a good person. The one benefit of audiobooks, and this is where people run into when it comes to demo production, once you have a good audio setup, you can make your own demos. Generally, in other avenues of voiceover like commercials and stuff like that, that's generally looked down upon. It's not considered a good idea to produce your own commercial demo. You want to have your best foot forward. In audiobooks, it's a little different because they want to know, especially if it's a publisher or even if you're cold calling, you want to give a person an idea of what they can expect from you. When it comes to audiobooks, you're not putting in music and sound effects. For audiobooks, it is just your voice and how well your space sounds and how you master the audio. So that's what casting clients, if you're auditioning and stuff like that, that's what people want to hear. What can we expect from your audio? If you sound like you're recording in a bathroom, don't expect to get much work. Yeah, also, it's not going to be like with commercials where they may have like a reel that kind of showcases you in different things. For audiobook demos, it will be specific to either certain genres or, like you said, with accents. If it's your Russian accent, a person listening to the audiobook, especially from a publisher, because they'll ask for demos, they don't want to hear the Russian accent 2 minutes in.
Yeah, give me the goods.
Like I want it.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure that the stuff is in the first few seconds. They rarely have ever listened to the entire demo. If you're doing a sci-fi book, I need to hear the sci-fi stuff. I don't want it to sound like it's a regular, like it could be any genre until a minute in. I want to hear some alien voices. They want to hear dialogue because for storytelling, especially when it comes to the fiction genres, that's the make or break. In a sci-fi book, it's not just one, third-person narrator the entire way through. You have characters. You have characters with emotions, and it's, scenes and drama and stuff like that. They need to know you can handle that. If it's a romance story, if your characters sound like they have no chemistry, well, then why would I want you on a romance title? Like, they need to know that you can handle the voice. There are a lot of people who promise, like, oh, I'll turn you into you'll be making thousands if you follow this course on XYZ. If they advertise with that, they're trying to sell you something. In this business, go for the ones that are honest about the work, especially ones who are actively working.
Thank you.
So, like I said, Sean Pratt, I'll hype him up. Very good coach, very good, because he not only teaches you the performance side of things. While he specializes in nonfiction, the elements of what he teaches you will apply to all audiobooks, not just nonfiction. But he also teaches you the business side of things. Because again, this ain't a hobby. This is a business. And so you need to know how to present yourself and how to operate as a business. Now, again, part-time narrator, especially when you're starting out, you probably don't have a lot of money. And as you said, there is a cost of doing business.
Yeah, man.
There are a lot of free resources. If you have a question, believe me, somebody else has had that question.
Asked that question before.
20 people before you have asked that same question.
Yeah.
And you can look that up in the groups. Search, how do I master the audio? Who is a good proofer? So there's a lot of resources you can use for free to get you with at least the basic knowledge. Now, again, you're going to run into a point where you will need to start getting some actual training. With audiobooks, I was told, like I'm sure a lot of people have been told, like, oh, you got a voice for radio, you have one of those special voices. And I'll be like, yeah, sure. But at the time, I wanted to do culinary. And when I was just doing one of these food events, I remember a guy, and I was in a grocery store, the guy just walked up to me, and instead of saying, oh, you got a voice for a radio thing, he said, you should try audiobooks.
Really?
And I said, audiobooks? He's like, yeah, man, I do them from home. I was like, really? Like, I never heard, like, when you think of recording and stuff, you're thinking of being in a professional studio.
Right.
You're working for a company, things like that. And at the time, I was still interested in culinary, but that idea sat in the back of my mind. And then one day, I'm a line cook in a restaurant and all that, and I said to myself, man, there's no freaking money in this. If anybody been in the restaurant industry, it's stressful, fast-paced, and unless you're like the business owner, you ain't making no money.
I see. So,
and if you are the business owner, you're always working. You got to work like crazy. And so then I said to myself, man, I remember that one guy, he told me about audiobooks, and he could do it from home. And so I looked into it, saw ACX, which for those who don't know, that's the platform that Amazon has for books to get onto Audible.
Okay.
And I looked on there, and they're like, oh, you could just sign up, start recording. And I did the thing that a lot of people do that you honestly should not do, where you just jump in. I was gassed up, all them people telling me, oh, man, you got that perfect voice. You got the voice, you got it. And I said, man, this should be a cakewalk. I jump in, and I had set up the lamest freaking booth. It was barely a booth. I knew that you needed a microphone, obviously, and you needed a space. My first space, unfortunately, I don't even know if I still have the pictures, but it was like kind of like a wall, just built of cardboard. With
cardboard.
Yeah, it was freaking cardboard with some blankets and towels I had stapled to it.
Bro.
With a Blue Yeti USB microphone.
Not the Yeti. No.
Yeah, connected to the book. And I'm auditioning, and I'm like, I know it's a numbers game. Anybody who's been through auditions knows just because you audition, you don't get the job.
Right.
Because you compete with everybody else. And thankfully, my, one guy picked me up, and he's like, oh, I like your voice or whatever. And he gave me an audiobook. I don't know why, looking back on how that audio sounded, but that was my foot into the industry. And learned through the school of hard knocks. The people who tell you that you can just jump into this industry, they're technically right, but you will do yourself a disservice, and you will set yourself up for a lot of disappointments and put yourself with a lot of bad clients if you don't train yourself, if you don't understand what you got to go through.